Tonight, the Israeli army says it's expanding its ground force operations inside the Gaza Strip. This is a Sky News special program live from Jerusalem. I'm Mark Austin. The headlines at 9 o'clock. The IDF says in the past few hours its air force has been widely and significantly striking underground targets in the enclave. It also accuses Hamas of hiding in Gaza hospitals and sheltering in tunnels underneath them. The head of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees warns of a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza.
We have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the street. This disaster will become a real nightmare.
Plus, we report from the West Bank, where 4 more Palestinians have been killed today. We'll bring you all the very latest developments live from the region as the UN approves a resolution calling for a humanitarian truce. Good evening from Jerusalem. We start with the latest on what appears to be a significant escalation of the conflict between Israel and Hamas this evening. A spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces has said the military is expanding its ground operations inside Gaza tonight, and it is prepared on all fronts to preserve Israel's security. And within the last few moments, the United Nations has approved a resolution calling for a humanitarian truce in Gaza. Well, earlier this evening, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said IDF soldiers are on high alert along the northern border with Lebanon and that the force has been shooting what he called cells across it.
Our ground forces are expanding their ground operations. IDF is operating at all dimensions in order to achieve the goals of the war. Earlier, we've exposed to the world the Shifa hospital. We've exposed the underground sphere and how this hospital was converted into using terrorist activities. Cynical usage of the Hamas. We've exposed this to the world and we will continue to do so. We will continue to attack in Gaza and its surroundings, and we keep calling upon the people living in Gaza and its environs that south from there they have better conditions. Now in the north there was some attacks from that area into Misgavam. We've exchanged fire back and there weren't any casualties from our forces. We continue with our effort to identify and intercept terrorist cells all the time. Since the beginning of the war, the IDF has caught and eradicated many shooting cells from across the border. Anybody who will risk us will pay with their lives. We are on high alert along the north border and we're constantly conducting a situation estimate. We follow up on regional developments. This morning, the Air Force forces identified a certain threat along the Red Sea. Israel will cooperate with Egypt and the U.S. and will increase its defense from threats around the Red Sea. We are prepared and defensive in all areas, and we make sure that we maintain Israel's security interests. At the home front, I call upon you to continue to adhere the instructions of the Home Front Command. These instructions save lives. Please continue to do so. The enemy continues to launch missiles and rockets, and you need to adhere to the instructions. It saves lives. Recently, we've received calls from many citizens that there is a certain delay in the Homefront Command app in informing and providing alerts. We are now working on improving this app, and let me remind Israelis that the app is merely one tool in our set of tools to alert people in real time, along with the telegram and alerts and sirens. Please use all these tools constantly. So far, we've informed the families of 310 IDF fatalities and 229 hostages. At this point in time, at this hour, our hearts are with the hostages and the abducted, and even more so on this Shabbat evening. And we are committed to this national mission to bring back all the hostages. We are at the end of the third week to this war. Hundreds of thousands of IDF troops, reservists, and security forces are deployed along Israel's borders and cyber, on the ground, in the air, and at the sea in order to protect and defend this country. Any questions? I'm from Kan News. We see more rockets targeting Israel. Well, I've kept saying, and I would like to repeat that, we have a very good defense systems, which is multi-tiered, multi-layered, and we know how to contend with the different threats, and we've seen the interception of the Air Force in the south this morning, but it's not hermetic defense. So this is why it's so important to constantly adhere to the instructions of the Home Front Command. Sheltered areas save lives, and we are going to continue to intercept. We will try to do so fully, but it's not fully proof. And as for what you said about the Shifa hospital in Gaza and the activities beneath it, does it mean that the IDF will attack there? And is it true that in recent hours Israel has agreed to a certain ceasefire in exchange for the release of hostages? Let me tell you something about the Shifa hospital. We keep bringing information. We will bring more information, and we will show the videos from the interrogations of the POWs along with information from the ISA. We will bring more and more information regarding the exploitation of civilian infrastructure and facilities, humanitarian facilities, including the Shifa hospital, and the cynic exploitation of the Hamas, which is using their own people as human shields in order to conduct terrorist activities. We are raising a red flag here. We will not be able to allow to conduct terrorist activities against Israel from hospitals, and together with the world, we'll have to somehow deal with this red flag. This is something that the State of Israel cannot allow. As for your question about the rumors that we keep hearing about some kind of a deal, let me answer you the following. In this context, I recommend that you do not pay attention to rumors, because this is a process of psychological terrorism, and the Hamas is cynically using and exploiting Israeli sentiments, and any credible piece of information, whether it's operational, civil, or intel, any piece of relevant information, if it is vetted and verified, we will first give it to the families and only then to deliver it to the general population. Until then, we will not succumb to the psychological terrorism and manipulations of Hamas. Another question, please, last one. We've seen that some of the towns and cities that were defined as green by the Home Front Command, there were some missiles and rockets hit, and the Minister of Education said that they will open schools only in the green areas. Have these instructions changed? Look, we are conducting a routine in the shadow of warfare and combat, and we need to do so with immense responsibility in collaboration with mayors, for example, the mayor of Tel Aviv, as well as the mayor of Beersheba and Ashkelon. It's a very big city, and we're going to continue to conduct a situation estimate. Wherever we can allow education and routine, we'll have to do so. We need to see that there are safe and sheltered areas, and this, of course, is decided with immense responsibility and deliberation. We are responsible for that. The Home Front Command, along with the local authorities, will update the instructions, up-to-date instructions every day. Shabbat Shalom.
Daniel Hagari there. Now, I was just talking to you about a resolution that's been adopted at the United Nations General Assembly. We can talk a little bit more about that now, because the resolution was adopted. There were 120 for the resolution, 14 against, 45 abstentions. It was for a humanitarian truce between Israel and Hamas, leading eventually to a halt in the conflict. Now, the US voted against it, the UK, interestingly, abstaining. But the point about this is it is effectively non-binding, and Israel is highly likely to ignore it. Now, our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, joins me now from Sderot in southern Israel. First of all, Deborah, just give us a sense. You're very close to the border, I have to say, and just give us a sense of what you're seeing and hearing.
Well, you could probably hear the sounds there off to my right, your left. It's Israeli forces firing into Gaza. Gaza is behind me. There have been as we've heard all day, escalating aerial bombardments of the Gaza Strip, and now this announcement by the Israeli military that they're going to be expanding their ground operations, expanding their raids. Obviously, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but in terms of down here on the ground, there is a lot of there's a lot of military noise. As you can hear explosions. You can hear a drone overhead. We've heard warplanes as well. We heard a few minutes ago what sounded like machine gun fire, some sort of gunfire just behind me. But obviously this is, it's nightfall. It's not very easy to see. And from what we know from the previous 2 nights, there have been raids taking place into Gaza then. Given what we've heard from the military spokesperson that is going to be expanded, you can only imagine that in the coming hours there will be a lot of increased activity around here into northern Gaza.
Yeah, and Deborah, I mean, a lot of talk has been about a big invasion with tanks and infantry and lots of soldiers. I mean, is it beginning to look like we might be talking about targeted incursions, dealing with the tunnels and dealing with other Hamas defences? Is that the way it's looking? Incursions, soldiers going in, special forces going in and out?
Well, that's definitely what it seems to be at the moment. And the aerial bombardments that have taken place during the day, the Israeli military say they were targeted against these tunnels. So there's this network of underground tunnels that are used by Hamas to launch attacks on Israel, but also to hide from the attacks that Israel then fires back. And so attempting to destroy those tunnels is clearly a key imperative. And it seems that the tactic that the Israelis have been using is significant bombardments from the skies ahead of this ground incursion. But what they've said all along, since the 7th of October, when that terrorist attack happened on Israeli soil, and Israel responded by saying they're going to destroy Hamas and called up more than 300,000 reservists to fight. They said that the fight would be different this time than previously. They haven't explained in what way, obviously. They're not going to give away their tactics. But yes, it does seem as though maybe it's going to be a bit more targeted as opposed to one massive push in. Clearly, they're very conscious of many things, but significantly the hostage situation. That's an ongoing crisis. It's also a key goal of this campaign. The Israeli military keeps saying, and the Prime Minister, that they will rescue their hostages. There's also, of course, the consideration of the many Palestinian civilians that have not moved out of the north and therefore are in harm's way. And then finally, there's the fact that Hamas know the Israeli military is coming. They will have laid traps. They will be hiding. They will be waiting for them. And they will be wanting to kill as many Israeli soldiers as possible. And so that will all be playing into the calculations that take place. And Israel will be trying to use elements of surprise. Clearly, you can't be that surprising, given everybody knows there is a massive formation of troops here. But in terms of how it's playing out, they're talking about these ground raids. We don't really understand the magnitude of them, only that they're bigger now, or they're going to be bigger than they have been over the past couple of nights.
OK, Deborah, we'll let you go. I'm conscious you are very close to the border with Gaza there, but thank you very much indeed. Well, Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed ally of Hamas in Lebanon, has repeatedly warned that any airstrikes in the region could cause a wider war. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, is in Lebanon. Good evening, Alex. And we've been talking throughout the evening about these US airstrikes on Syria. Nothing to do, say the Americans, with the Israel-Hamas conflict, but nevertheless raising tensions still further. And now we have this apparent escalation on the ground in Gaza.
Nothing to do with Israel-Hamas conflict, says the United States, Mark, but that's not how it is perceived here. Certainly, United States is seen as a key ally of Israel, walking lockstep with it as it carries out its bombing campaign in Gaza. And it is why various militias have fired drones and rockets towards military assets. Now, we have seen the United States' response to that. A pre-dawn raid with F-16s hit a couple of military bases that are used by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards in Syria along the Iraqi border. Those bases held ammunition and weapons. It's not where we think those missiles and rockets were fired from, but it's where the weapons and the ammunition came from. That's why they were targeted. So they're basically sending a message to the Iranians, don't get involved. They're also responding to say, you know, cease and desist, stop your rockets, stop your missiles, otherwise we will up our aggression. But it's a very fine line they're walking because they want to make sure this doesn't lead to further escalation. The big fear is that what you're seeing going on in southern Israel ignites a broad war which sucks in actors from across the region. And that would make the crisis that we're seeing in southern Israel, which is already extremely profound, it would be, you know, really very significant indeed. We've had a prelude of that, of course. In 2006, we saw a war fought between Israel and Hezbollah. It was enormously destructive for both sides. In this case, we could see, you know, it spread far further. So that is the reason that people are sounding the alarm. That is why the United States is using rhetoric to try and keep a lid on things. Whether it will be able to achieve that, that is the big question. Hezbollah, of course, has warned already that it would be a red line if there was a significant ground incursion into Gaza. They will be watching very closely what goes on. Another red line, of course, is the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian situation and the loss of life in Gaza caused by the, you know, extensive Israeli bombing. Another red line is well, will there be a response? Now, Hezbollah says they will act. They won't just sit on the sidelines indefinitely. We are already seeing near daily clashes on the border of southern Lebanon with northern Israel. Those have been going on since October the 7th. They've been relatively contained. The big question now is, will that expand much further?
OK, Alex, thank you very much indeed. We were just hearing from Deborah Haynes down there right on the border with Gaza that she had been hearing a lot of explosions inside Gaza. We have some latest picture, I think now, from the Gaza Strip, and it does show some activity there with tanks and bulldozers crossing into Gaza through gaps that were made previously in previous operations, so heading into Gaza. And we've also got some pictures, I understand, of explosions taking place. And this is the Israeli Defense Force saying that they are looking particularly to get to the tunnels and this network of tunnels that Hamas has been using in Gaza. Let's speak now to our military analyst, Sean Bell, who joins me. Sean, just first of all, what do you make of what Israel is saying at the moment about what seems to be a significant ground operation going on, another one of these incursions, it seems?
Yeah, good evening, Mark. I know that everybody's sort of waiting in bated breath for some massive go signal, and suddenly 350,000 people, you know, race across the front line. I think it's highly unlikely we're at that point just yet. As a military guy, you'd always want to risk mitigate these sorts of major, highly risky operations. And I think we're seeing that with these raids that are gradually escalating, both geographically different, probing, testing, and things like cutting off the power, as alleged to have happened this evening, and and certainly the mobile networks forces Hamas onto different communications lines, which of course often can be intercepted. So all of this is quite predictable in a way. What I'm not sure we're seeing yet, as Deborah Haynes was saying, we're not yet seeing any of the indicators of a mass invasion. But as I think we've discussed before, I'm still very sceptical that this will simply be a binary decision, either in or out. I think the first phase of the operation almost certainly will be an armoured push to try to put a ring of steel around the city of Gaza. And then, of course, you've got the equation of whether or not you put infantry in, whether it's special forces, or whether you just pause a little bit and wait to see what Hamas does. But I think there's a lot still to play for. I'm yet to be convinced we're going to go onto a full-scale invasion all the way into the middle of Gaza City.
Picture now of what is going on, or what has been going on in Gaza in the last few hours. We just showed some picture before that, which was from last night's operation. But these now pictures of what is going on inside Gaza, and pretty much what you were talking about, this preparation for units going in to try to deal with these underground tunnels, I assume.
Well, we've seen a phenomenal scale of air attacks. I mean, the first 6 days, 6,000 bombs. It's a huge air operation, and that has continued relentlessly. And I think we're seeing that now. What is clear is that most military operations tend to be done under the cover of darkness, normally in sort of 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, when most of the soldiers feeling, or your enemy is feeling, most weary. So you catch them at their least well prepared. But I do think what's interesting is time is starting to tick against Israel. Every day there's growing pressure for humanitarian pauses in the fighting. The hostage situation, the Hamas were drip feeding hostages out. All of the talk today about potentially hostages being released if there was a pause. But Prime Minister Netanyahu will not want Hamas to be dictating the tempo of this response, and therefore I wouldn't be at all surprised if this writing down of Hamas is going on. I would slightly pick issue, though, with using air power to take out the tunnels. It's not clear to me that Israel knows exactly where these hundreds of kilometers of the Gaza metro are, and it's very specialist bombs that take those out, and they explode underground. They don't generally show the sort of flashes and bangs and smoke that you're seeing here. I think those tunnels will pose a very real threat to any invading force, and I'm still not quite clear how Israel will intend to deal with those without suffering huge casualties along the way.
And just finally, Sean, there will be 229 families tonight, very, very concerned about an escalation of the military operation inside Gaza, which raises this whole issue of the complication that these hostages create for the Israeli military. I mean, it's going to be a very complicated operation anyway without the hostages, but trying to get the hostages out safely during some operation like that is, well, it just, Lord Dannett was saying earlier, it just doesn't bear thinking about how difficult that would be.
You're absolutely right, Mark. And the hard, cold reality of this is if your only priority was to get the hostages out, then you wouldn't do a ground offensive because given the situation where they're likely to be held, it's very, very high risk. And the risks to the hostages getting suffering along the way, casualties or even being killed, is pretty significant. The challenge, of course, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu is in no mood to let Hamas dictate the terms, and therefore his other option is to go in and militarily use probably special forces and try to pluck them out. But those special forces going into tunnel network, which will be booby-trapped, there could be poisonous gas, there'll be all sorts of terrible surprises awaiting the IDF. And I have no doubt that the hostages will suffer a very gruesome fate if they don't find a way of extracting them safely. But I think that's going to be extremely difficult in the circumstances and very difficult for the families involved.
Okay, we should just say negotiations, we're told, are going on between Qatar and Hamas and other intermediaries, and we don't know the status of those negotiations. But Sean, thank you very much indeed for being with us this evening. Now, the First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, has spoken out against the conflict. In a post on X, he said Gaza is under intense bombing. Telecommunications have been cut. We can't get through to our family who have been trapped in this war zone for almost 3 weeks. We can only pray they survive the night. How many more children have to die before the world says enough? You're watching Sky News live from Jerusalem. Coming up, we'll get more on the mood in Israel as the military says it's expanding its operations inside Gaza.
Well, this is about the fourth fish kill in about 6 years, and it is directly as a result of agricultural pollution, namely slurry. It couldn't have happened at a worse time when a lot of fish are now moving upstream to spawn into the upper parts of the river. So far, we can't fully assess the damage done, but we know that hundreds of trout, salmon parr, and also Dullahan, it's the name of a local fish, have been killed. It's absolutely devastating, and it's absolutely heartbreaking because so much work has been done over the last 7-8 years by local conservation groups, by all the local anglers, and also involving the local communities who have been involved in cleanups of the river and removing all the debris, rubbish, agricultural pollution are commercial. And the source of this recent pollution has already been detected. We are hoping that there will be litigation, there will be taken to be against the people, the perpetrators of this here terrible act. It's done so much awful damage. However, we have in the past campaigned against the paltry petty fines that are being meted out by the courts here in the north of Ireland. And if this was to happen in England or in Wales, Scotland, there'd be fines of up to 20,000 to 30,000 pounds, but we're getting slap on the wrist type fines here of 2,000 pounds for devastation that's going to take many years for the river to recover. And so much work has been done by the keepers of the Kellan.
Let's get a little bit more now on the mood in Israel tonight as the IDF expands its ground operations. I'm joined now from Tel Aviv by Yotam Confino, who is foreign editor for the British newspaper Jewish News. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. And just first of all, I wonder what your sense is, your understanding of what is going on this evening and what may go on in the coming hours.
Well, we are obviously seeing now, once again, Israel getting very, very close to the ground offensive. It's the third day in a row that they're now operating on the other side of the border. We're hearing Palestinian reports that tanks are once again in Gaza. And as we heard the military say, they're expanding now the ground offensive. It's not an official ground offensive, but we're very, very close to. And I think a lot of Israelis, especially those who have relatives who are held hostage by Hamas, are holding their breath. They're very worried about what's going to happen, obviously, because the minute Israel goes in, as we heard earlier in the program, there's a big likelihood that the hostages will be killed simply. It will be very difficult to get them out from where Hamas is hiding them.
Yeah, let's just talk a little bit about public opinion, Yotam. I mean, do they support, first of all, the idea of a big ground operation inside Gaza to deal with Hamas? Is there broad support for that?
There is, but the timing is crucial. So the latest poll we saw from an Israeli newspaper said that 49% support that the ground offensive should be delayed. They agree that there should be a ground offensive, but it has to be delayed. Now, if we just go 10 days back, the numbers were completely different. 65% actually supported an immediate ground offensive. And that has something to do with the number of hostages that keep rising. The first week or so, Israel didn't even say how many hostages were kept in Gaza. And because we didn't really know, a lot of people were in favor of just launching the ground offensive and getting rid of Hamas. But when Israelis found out how many people were actually in there, babies, elderly, the mood changed completely. And we also know that 100 people are still missing, which means that there could be not just 229, but 329 people in there. And again, the higher the number of civilians in there, the more the mood changes when it comes to the ground offensive.
Right, and so if public opinion then is broadly in favour of giving time to get the hostages out and, that should be a priority, that puts enormous pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu, who is already, as we know, under a huge amount of pressure.
Absolutely. We hear growing calls from very, very former senior people, senior defense ministers, saying they should have given Hamas whatever they wanted. It is unacceptable that such a large amount of people, civilians, are being held hostage by Hamas, and that Israel is right now only talking about eliminating Hamas. It's astonishing to see how many people are talking very critically about how Netanyahu and his government, how they've handled it so far. And it's mainly because the government would like to show that it's in charge. It's not letting it be dictated by Hamas, and that it's not willing to negotiate with terrorists. Well, if you want your hostages back, you're going to have to negotiate. It's quite simple. So there's a huge pressure on the government today. There was a heartbreaking moment where a mother was interviewed on live TV, in Israeli TV, and she was crying and fuming, saying, I hope that the leaders tonight, when they sit for Shabbat dinner with their family and they look at their kids, they realize that it could have easily been their kids held hostage inside Gaza, and that they would probably do everything they could to get them back. So public opinion is really, I would say it's a very, very contentious issue right now, simply because it doesn't look good, to be honest.
Okay, Yotam, thank you very much indeed. And we'll have much more from Jerusalem after the break. Welcome back then to Jerusalem, where Israel says it is expanding its ground operations inside Gaza this evening, and there have been a number of explosions seen on the skyline, and the Israelis say they are going in to deal or try to deal with some of the tunnels going on where Hamas is said to be hiding, and a whole network of tunnels there that the Israelis are targeting. Well, earlier this evening I spoke with Mustafa Barghouti, a leading Palestinian voice here, who's in Ramallah on the West Bank and is calling for an immediate ceasefire. This is what he had to say.
People of Gaza now are without food, without water, without electricity, without fuel, and now without communication, without internet and without phone lines. That is totally unacceptable situation. We already heard from our medical teams there, the Palestinian Medical Relief, as well as Red Crescent teams and the Ministry of Health. They're complaining about the fact that their inability of doing their job properly without communication facilities. This will affect the possibility of transporting injured people, of providing healthcare to people, and medical emergency services. It's a total humanitarian disaster caused by the Israeli blockade and this act of collective punishment. And meanwhile, the Israeli airstrikes continue. So far, we had more than 7,050 people killed, including no less than 2,913 children. What is really sad is that there is about 1,500 Palestinians under the rubble. Probably 600 or 700 of them are children who cannot be taken out. And I think yesterday, the Ministry of Health finished all this talk about the numbers of Palestinians killed and injured by issuing a statement with the names of all the people who were killed and their ID numbers, which really denies and revokes the American president's claim that the numbers are incorrect. I think Mr. Guterres and the United Nations has confirmed that today, that the numbers are correct, and they are horrifying.
I just wonder, these suggestions by Israel that Hamas are using these hospitals as sort of control centers, shielding behind patients and by civilians, what do you make of all that?
I think this is all lies. And the Israeli side keeps lying to justify their criminal acts against civilian population. They lied before, and many of their lies were revoked about decapitation of children and rape of women. And I don't want to repeat what other correspondents have apologized for, reporting such lies that turned out to be lies. Now they want to justify attacking people in hospitals. In a place like Shifa Hospital, which is the central and biggest hospital in Gaza, which has, I think, around 1,000 injured people now in their beds, there are about 50,000 people taking refuge there. Why? Because Israel said they should move from the north and center to the south to be safe, but they continued to bombard the south as well. So there were so many families, including let me just finish this line, please. The people in the south were also bombarded. So people are sitting in the hospital because there is no other safe spot in the whole of Gaza Strip. And don't forget that Gaza is only 140 square miles with 2.3 million people. It's a savage attack. It should not happen. What we need now is immediate ceasefire. What we need now is a humanitarian ceasefire. What we need now is the provision of supply to people who need medications and need immediate support because they cannot survive under these difficult conditions. This is a terrible situation in every sense of the word.
That was Mustafa Barghouti speaking earlier on Sky News. Now, while Gaza is the main focus, the conflict is also affecting Palestinians in the West Bank. 4 Palestinians were killed by Israeli troops there today, according to the official Palestinian news agency. It means 110 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since the Hamas attack almost 3 weeks ago. Our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, reports now from Nablus in the West Bank.
The West Bank town of Huwara is almost completely deserted. Shops are shut, there's barely any traffic and virtually no sign of life. It all adds to the eerie sense of menace here. Military vehicles patrol the town. The Palestinians who live here have been told to keep off the streets and not to drive. This is now a military area, and we weren't allowed to stop. This is one of the main routes to the city of Nablus, all but one closed to traffic and heavily guarded. This is the face of the West Bank occupation. They gather in the ancient streets of the old city of Nablus for prayers. The talk amongst everyone is about the events of the past 3 weeks, the bombing of Gaza, and what is going to happen next. Pictures of people recently killed on the West Bank have been posted on the walls of buildings around the mosque. People here say the international community is failing the Palestinian people and is, in effect, condoning the collective punishment of Palestinians by Israel after the Hamas attack. We met father and son Samir and Zaid Akruk after prayers.
The idea of killing from the other side, the occupation, is something normal for them. They don't know human rights, they don't know civil rights, they don't know international law, they don't know anything, and they don't apply anything. They know only how to kill. I am 65, by the way. I have been witnessing this daily since I am 12. I'm from the old city. So we have been witnessing this since long, and we are paying a very high price.
I have a 6-month boy. I am ashamed to look at him in my home. Yeah, I speak truly. When I look to my child in the home, I cry, because when I see the world is like the audience. They don't have anything to do, not only the Arab people, not only the Islamic people, all the world.
The crowds weren't huge, but the support for Hamas was clear on the steps of the mosque. There's a real anger on the West Bank.
Well, nearly 2,000 people have been injured and over 100 killed on the West Bank in the last 3 weeks or so. There is a sense here that this is really collective punishment by Israel on the Palestinian people. There is a fear that if Israel invades Gaza, then this already tense situation is going to explode.
In Ramallah, youths once again built barricades, burnt tyres and threw stones at Israeli soldiers 100 or so metres away. This is standard now, and it always includes some amongst their number being shot by the Defence Force snipers. Another boy shot and whisked away to hospital as this depressing cycle of violence continues, day after day. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, on the West Bank.
Well, in the UK, Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham has joined calls for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. He's echoed sentiments from the Scottish Labour leader Anna Sawar and also London Mayor Sadiq Khan, the three high-profile figures, the latest to speak out on an issue which is causing quite a split within party ranks. Our political correspondent Ali Fortescue has been taking a closer look.
Join the growing international calls for a ceasefire.
Some of the most senior British politicians going against the Labour leader. The Mayor of Manchester today.
I joined the international community in calling for a ceasefire.
And the Mayor of London calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, joining hundreds of councillors, the Labour leader in Scotland, and a growing number of MPs.
Syria, Partygate, all of those, the inbox was very busy, but I think this is on an unprecedented scale.
In terms of numbers?
We've got 1,000 unanswered at the moment. Innocent Gazans are being killed. We can't go on like this. The last 3 weeks has been horrific since Hamas's barbaric, sadistic attacks on innocent Israelis of every age. So what I'd say needs to happen now is we need a ceasefire because we don't want to be on the wrong side of history.
What spooked MPs is this. Unhappy constituents making their views known in Labour seats up and down the country, in places like Bradford.
We have a Labour leader who claims to be working for humanity, but he's not even ready to call for a ceasefire.
I've seen a lot of posts where people are like, what do we do now? Who do we vote for now?
But this is a Labour leadership haunted by the past, accusations of anti-Semitism now echoing the government line.
Should Labour frontbenchers who have called for a ceasefire be disciplined? It's not for me to decide whether my colleagues should or shouldn't be disciplined. I fully understand the anguish that people feel, and I've talked to all of my colleagues all the time. I fully understand that anguish. But Keir Starmer, as the leader of the Labour Party, has been crystal clear. Israel has a right to defend itself.
A lot of the discontent was started because of a radio interview that Keir Starmer gave, where he effectively suggested that Israel has a right to cut off supplies to Gaza. It was a position he later clarified, but since then, anger has spread, and what we're seeing now is something quite different, a growing consensus among senior figures in the Labour Party, some Muslim, some not Muslim, from up and down the country, that a ceasefire is the right option, and that goes directly against the party leadership.
Ceasefire now! As shows of solidarity with Gaza and Israel spill onto streets all over the UK, the Labour Party is treading an uneasy line. This is one of Keir Starmer's biggest tests yet. He knows united parties win elections. Ali Fortescue, Sky News, Westminster.
That's it for now. I'm back at 10. Let's go back to Barbara in London.
Thank you, Mark. This is Sky News. Coming up, we're going to have the latest on the manhunt in Maine. The search continues for the gunman who shot dead 18 people and injured 13 more.
Hello and welcome to the Middle East Business Report. These are the top stories from across the region this week. The UAE's clean energy producer Masdar has announced the launch of the country's first wind farms. Dotted throughout the United Arab Emirates, the company said the combined capacity of these wind turbines exceeds 100 megawatts, capable of powering more than 23,000 homes. Oil prices have been volatile this week off the back of Israel's preparations for a ground invasion of Gaza. The price of Brent crude oil edged up on Wednesday on fears that fighting could spill over into the wider Middle East, only to fall again on Thursday. Italy's Pirelli Tyres and Saudi Arabia's Sovereign Wealth Fund have agreed to establish a tyre manufacturing facility in the country.